Further debate. The member from Oshawa.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker, and I am pleased to be able to rise in this House as the critic for infrastructure, transportation and highways for the official opposition, twice in the span of like a week and a half, but today on a different bill, and the one before us is an act to amend the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification System Act, also known as the Building Infrastructure Safely Act of 2023. And I'm glad, of course, to be able to talk about building, about infrastructure, and most importantly, safely. So while this bill before us deals with locates, with Ontario One Call, I'm excited to take the opportunity and really delve into other ideas for building infrastructure safely in this province. But more on that later, Speaker. What I'll say is that this bill makes incremental updates to the Ontario One Call system, which has already undergone 2 previous major updates in the past few years. The need to call before you dig, Speaker, or click before you dig to build infrastructure safely. It's not a new idea for the NDP. In fact, as we have heard, the Ontario NDP co-sponsored a bill back in 2012 with the member from Sarnia-Lambton. The former NDP member for Hamilton East Stony Creek co-sponsored, I think, the then Bill 8. It may have had a few numbers, but it was the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification Act that established Ontario One Call as a single point of contact for all underground utility location services in Ontario. Everyone agrees that locates are an important or a key part of building safely. When we think about it from a residential perspective, folks know that if they're going to dig their post holes and they're not really sure what lies beneath, that is the perfect opportunity. Actually, that's not the perfect opportunity, not just when you're digging. When you plan to dig, that's the good time to call Ontario One Call and say, hey, I have a project and I'm wanting to put shovels in the ground or a post hole digger, but I'm wanting to get into the earth. Can you make sure that that is safe and okay? And so Ontario One Call and its members, so the infrastructure owners, the folks who have the pipes and the wires and the tubes and the stuff, but the underground infrastructure, they know what lies beneath. So to use an example of building a deck, you're unlikely to dig and hit a train. However, when we're dealing with larger municipal projects, and large, water main projects or bigger projects, we definitely know that we need to do things well, because if you hit a gas main, if you shut off the lights in your community, at best you're going to be unpopular, and at worst people have been killed or sustained significant injury, which is why we all agree this is not a partisan issue, that safety first and second and third, frankly. But, Speaker, we are glad to see, and what we have heard from different stakeholders, we are glad to see that the government has been listening to excavators and infrastructure owners and addressing their concerns about efficiencies and backlogs. I will acknowledge that this bill comes from what we understand to have been part of that consultation and based on what they've heard, and we'll get into that, and there's more to be done. I think the short version of why we are here is that this bill the Ontario One Call was basically born from a private member's bill, and since that time has evolved, right? Has become quite an agency, and there need to be these changes as they're figuring out some of their tripwires, so to speak. Speaker, I'm hopeful that what's in this bill will get us to where we need to be when it comes to addressing the backlog, addressing the concerns that have been raised. I imagine based on what some of the recommendations are from folks like the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and other affected and interested parties, that there will still be work to do. And I hope that the government continues to do the consultation with all sides of these stories. So, Speaker, because the government has named this bill the Building Infrastructure Safely Act, I will also take today as an opportunity to invite them into a conversation about building infrastructure safely and discuss what we've heard from the building industry, from environmental partners and municipalities about what we need to build infrastructure safely in this province, whether it's an underwater parking garage or a 5-story building in the flight path of airplanes from Pearson, you know, whatever they need to talk about building infrastructure safely. Speaker, this bill amends the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification System Act and defines 4 different types of locate requests to which different rules and timelines are going to apply. So there's a dedicated locator request. Second is an emergency request. Third is a specified request, and which has specific criteria, but it doesn't meet the first 2. And the fourth is a standard request. It allows Ontario One Call to independently set fees to members in relation to administration of the Act. And I just want to be clear, there will be no cost to someone picking up the phone and needing a locate. Locates will not have fees. The fees referred to in this Act given to Ontario One Call, that's administrative. That's about keeping the lights on, is our understanding. And I appreciate the briefing that we got from the ministry staff who know their stuff and were clear in explaining and alleviating our fears that locates will not cost anything for someone to call and get them. Okay? What a deterrent that would be. Should I call to be safe? Oh no, it would cost me money. I'm not going to do that. No one wants that to be the case, and so that's not happening. So when I talk about fees in this case, I'm referring to administrative fees. There are time limits for a specified request that shall be prescribed, as opposed to the statutory 5 days for a standard request. This bill fleshes out four types of locate requests instead of, I believe it had been 2. And it also broadens the minister's regulation-making powers, enabling the minister, for example, to prescribe obligations for excavators with respect to the submission of locate requests. I'll be honest, this is a piece that we're watching. I wouldn't say that I have concerns, but I have interest in this section, because when we discussed it at the briefing about what the minister would need to use those regulation-making authority or powers for, there were examples around timelines, that if 5 days didn't fit or 10 days didn't fit, that they could change it. And that sounded as though it made sense. However, when I talked to my colleagues from up north, from different areas in the province where it's supposed to be 5 days for a locate, but it doesn't take 5 or 10, it takes a month and a half, right? Where does the regulation authority, does that come into play there? How do we ensure that folks in more challenging parts of the province, I'm not saying the north is more challenging just because it's the north, nor are the members. However, what would ensure that their locate requests are handled in a far more timely fashion? So that's my question about that. The owner of underground infrastructure shall not charge a fee for fulfilling an emergency specified or standard request. That is laid out in this bill. And I'll say that because even though the practice has been no one charges for locates, there were threats looming because the Act had been silent to this point. In other jurisdictions, no one pays for locates, or there's no charge for locates. So here we have them putting into the bill clearly that fees cannot be charged. So as I said, it was missing common practice, nobody was charging them, but we'll get into how we got here. So we don't have concerns with those things because it's fairly clear, and as it was laid out in our briefing, there are essentially 4 buckets of changes in this Act, and that is prohibiting infrastructure owners from charging for locates, better aligning one call with other agencies. We heard from the government. I think we're all reaching to fill an hour when this is a bill that, is fairly straightforward. But they were talking about other administrative authorities, right? And so one call, because it started from a PMB, needs to have some of its legislation fleshed out. So that's why we're here. Also, third bucket, removing a certain recourse provision in the Act that excavators have. It was a provision that hadn't been used, and I understand that the government made that change based on consultation and what they had heard. And the fourth, enhanced regulation making authority that the minister will have. So, Speaker, I'll read to you actually from Ontario One Call. They often have the responsibility for educating Ontarians to make sure that folks know to call before they dig or click before they dig, and that's individuals or homeowners or property owners. But I'm going to read from their press release that says, quote, according to a recent survey, 2 out of 3 Ontarians planning to dig this year will inadvertently put themselves, their loved ones, and their community at risk by not requesting a locate through Ontario One Call. Digging without locates is dangerous and against the law. Ontario One Call is raising awareness about the need to click before you dig for any size excavation project. And they said, quote, we are working with all our partners to ensure that everyone in Ontario understands that if they are planning to dig this year, by law, they must request a locate. That way, buried infrastructure owners can identify where their vital cables, wires, and pipes are situated and provide locates. Everyone needs to dig safely, and the first step is to contact Ontario One Call and request a locate. They provided some statistics. There were 4,769 reported damages to buried infrastructure, which is an increase of 8% from the previous year, averaging 19 damages per day. 37% of reported damages were due to digging without locates, not requesting and or digging without receiving a locate. 61% of damages caused by people digging without locates were on hazardous and dangerous infrastructure. These damages cost billions of dollars to repair and put people at risk. Under the law, if you dig without a locate, you are subject to potential fines and liable for any damages. So as Ontario One Call explains, quote, we do not provide the actual locates. We are the one-stop shop that connects people who want to dig with the owners of infrastructure. There is no cost to request a locate through Ontario One Call, and you will reduce your risk. It's a win-win. If you are planting a tree, building a fence, replacing a mailbox, putting in a new garden, or planning to dig for any reason, you must follow these 5 steps, and they lay it out. But the first step that I'll share with Ontarians is visit OntarioOneCall.ca to learn more about how to request a locate. You follow the steps, and eventually you are able to dig safely. So, Speaker, I'm happy to be part of a public service announcement when it comes to infrastructure and safety, but it isn't always that simple when it comes to municipalities or to companies, to larger projects. It's one thing if I'm putting in a new mailbox or a garden. However, bigger projects, and depending on where they are, obviously are quite involved. Speaker, let's take us back in time a little bit. The member from Sarnia-Lambton has already spoken a little bit about this, but he and the member for Hamilton East Stony Creek, Paul Miller, had worked on this bill back in the day, and here is a part of an article from 2012. So at the provincial legislature on Queen's Park on December 2nd, the Ontario One Call Act, or Bill 8, received all-party support on second reading. This bill affects all of us in the landscape industry. Okay, sorry, this is from the Horticultural Trades Association, an article. Affects all of us in the landscape industry. It requires that all municipalities, utility firms, locate companies, and other companies who have utility infrastructure in the ground be part of the One Call process. And he reminds that presently, before digging commences, Some landscape and excavation companies need to make as many as 13 calls to ensure that all underground wires, pipes, cables, gas mains, etc. are located. This is a major endeavor by the Ontario Regional Common Ground Alliance to unite the industry to support efforts to create an efficient, cost-effective, and simple system. And there you have it. He goes on to say this legislation will save lives, make workers safe, and provide an effective, cost-efficient process to provide locates for all who live and work in Ontario. So that's from 2012, and here we are, flash forward, 2013. 23. What year is it? 2023. I knew it had a 3 in it. Sorry, I'm thinking, talking, and okay. It's 2023. It's wrapping up. We're going to see 2024. So this legislation has had success, but as we're here, it needs to be continually fleshed out until all of the stakeholders who interact with it are able to efficiently conduct their business safely. So we had heard speaker from the Electricity Distributors Association, and of course infrastructure owners have a vested interest in these locates. So I'm sure that there's a fair bit involved in a company having to go through all of their, all of their information to provide a locate. And we do know it can take the time that it takes. It can be quite complicated. There's pressure on them to do it quickly and effectively. But I will say that those infrastructure owners want to do it well because nobody wants their infrastructure damaged. No one wants someone to rush a job. It's everyone benefits from this system when it's working well. So we heard from the Electricity Distributors Association, and they said the EDA is supportive of Bill 153, that this legislation strikes a balanced approach to improve locate delivery services that enables the construction of key infrastructure projects while maintaining the safety of workers and protecting affordability for electricity ratepayers. They said, we're also pleased that Bill 153 adopted our recommendation to remove duplicative recourse through the Ontario Land Tribunal. As we have seen over the past year, parties have been effectively resolving disputes through faster, more efficient, and less adversarial processes such as mediation. Side note, I really encourage the government to continue doing well what it's doing well. So if they're getting feedback that there's a mediation process that is working well, make sure it can continue to do that. We know that the Ontario Land Tribunal is overwhelmed, to say the least. So if we have alternate means of resolving things, let's ensure that can continue. But this is an interesting bill. I'm trying to think of how many times in 9 years that I have been able to talk about a bill that addressed a need, and all the folks that have been consulting feel that they have been heard. That said, they have also shared that there is some more to do, and we will hope that continues. Part of why we're here, though, is because there was that threat of fees looming on the horizon. And as I said, the bill was silent, and to this point, no one has charged fees for locates. But this is a piece from the Daily Commercial News back in March, and it's entitled, "Proposed Enbridge Locate Fee Would Add Millions to Infrastructure Projects." And this reads, quote, "About 2 weeks ago, we got this notice from Enbridge Gas noting that as of May 1st, they were going to start charging for locate delivery," explained Nadia Todorova, Executive Director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario. Quote, "It was going to be $200 per locate, and for every relocate request, which really took us aback, because over the last 11 years since the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification System has been in place, there has never been a charge to get a locate." So this was going to be an incredibly seismic shift to the way that locate system works in Ontario, coupled with the fact that they gave us about 6 weeks' notice before digging season starts, and they start to implement this fee. One of our biggest concerns was the fact that this was going to set a precedent. On March 23rd, Enbridge issued an update stating, quote, Enbridge Gas would like to provide notice of our decision to put the implementation of the locate delivery charge on pause. We will use this time to continue our industry consultations, and Enbridge Gas will provide additional information once we have confirmed our approach, end quote. So Enbridge put it out there in March, and then by March 23rd, had put it on pause and was going to continue to look into it. A lot of folks wrote a letter to the Premier, and Todorova says here, quote, if the fee had gone ahead, it would make Ontario the only jurisdiction in North America to charge excavators for standard locate delivery. In terms of economic competitiveness and just getting projects off the ground, it would have huge implications. So there was also fear that if Enbridge did go ahead with that, they did not, and now they legally cannot. But there was concern. ResCon President Richard Lyle says, even though it doesn't seem like a lot of money, it will add up. Quote, it's not just Enbridge. You can have multiple calls on a project and it adds up. We're at the point now where we're looking at everything in terms of what goes into the cost of housing and whether or not it's justified. If you take this to its logical conclusion, you could be talking about a few $1,000s per unit, depending on the circumstances, end quote. So that was the alarm, right? That was the concern, I would imagine, that brought this to an immediate head because the Act had been silent on fees for locates. Now it will no longer be silent. There will be no fees for locates. And when I'm saying fees for locates, I will acknowledge that what we've heard from infrastructure owners is there is a cost to provide the locates, right? For the business themselves, for the infrastructure owner themselves, they have work to do in order to provide a locate. So it's not a matter of they magically happen and there's no cost. However, there cannot be a fee. So leaving it to the infrastructure owners to continue to cooperate with the government and Ontario One Call, yes, because we want to ensure that those locates happen in a timely fashion and that everybody has what they need to build infrastructure safely. But Speaker, I have already mentioned a bit about the backlogs. The backlog for construction and important infrastructure projects, and there are many things right now contributing to backlogs or contributing to challenges for timelines, especially when dealing with procurement and supplies and all of that. However, focusing on locates, this is from an article from the aggregate road building industry news, rock2road.com, an article that says, contractors in Ontario are seeing wait times of sometimes more than 30 days for utility locates to be completed. The Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario and its stakeholders are asking the province to speed up response times. Quote, this is a really important issue for our members in the residential and civil sectors, said Andy Manahan, Executive Director at the RCCAO. Quote, these contractors work on road systems, water sewer systems, and other similar sectors. Work cannot begin on a project until utility locates have been completed. And according to Ontario legislation, a utility locate should be completed within 5 days. We're waiting weeks or even months for those markings, end quote. Still quoting the article, utility location is the process of identifying and labeling public utility mains that are underground. These mains may include lines for telecommunication, electricity distribution, natural gas, cable television, fiber optics, traffic lights, street lights, storm drains, water mains, and wastewater pipes. Goes on to say, contractors can't start digging until we have locates on the ground. The 5-day limit has not been respected. Over time, the delivery of locates has become worse, seeing them delivered later and later every year. The reason it is such a problem is in our business, we don't work 12 months of the year. As soon as the ground freezes, we stop working. We're limited to an 8 or 9 month long construction season. If contractors have a project start date of July 1st with an expected close date of November 15th, 3 weeks matters a lot. If a project is getting pushed back that much, we're running into the ground freezing, which impacts our ability to close our projects. This this group had laid out at that time a 6-point plan. I won't read that into the record because this is a couple of years old, and I can already look at that list and see that some of those things are, not to say in this bill, but have already been talked about in this legislature. And I would say that that is what we would hope to see when it comes to feedback and actual consultation, which is kind of a novelty because I don't often see that consultation is A, accessible, and B, adopted. So, all right. And again, and I feel like I'm spending a lot of time being positive, which is a weird feeling. But as far as the one call, hey, I have it in me to be positive. It's just really hard opposite this government. All right. One call consultation. From this article, the Daily Commercial News, consultation launched on Ontario one call system, halting potential for locate charges from utilities. Again, as I have been saying, this is what they heard out in the community. There especially was fear with that $200 Enbridge threat of a fee. And it says, the Ministry of Public and Business Service Delivery and the Ministry of Energy will be consulting on potential options that could prohibit fees being charged by members of Ontario One Call for underground infrastructure locates. And look at that. Here we are. Yeah, I've already covered that. All right. More of the same. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce, Speaker, has written a few letters to the former minister and now to the current minister of Public and Business Service Delivery, and they have said, quote, with insights from our Infrastructure Policy Council and Energy Policy Council, we are writing to offer solutions to help address the backlog of locate requests, which is an essential requisite for new and existing infrastructure builds and expansions across Ontario. As your ministry is aware, a locate request must be submitted to Ontario One Call for any activity that involves breaking ground, including the construction or repair of buried infrastructure, excavations, and the installation of buried fiber optic cables. While we recognize Bill 93 and your government's ongoing efforts to modernize Ontario One Call, additional steps must be taken as many contractors and developers continue to face long wait times for a locator to begin the initial assessment that would allow the dig to move ahead. These longer wait times have resulted in significant project delays. The backlog of locate requests is especially challenging in Northern Ontario, where there is already a limited window of opportunity to complete critical infrastructure projects given the short summer construction season. As such, it jeopardizes the government's ability to deliver on priority projects, including its mandate of province-wide broadband connectivity by 2025. They go on to say, the backlog has compounded growing barriers to completing projects on time, including labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and permitting and planning delays. Together, these challenges result in significant financial burdens for businesses, impact project outcomes, and hinder a community's ability to attract new investments in the future. In short, we urge your ministry to continue working with Ontario One Call to support the modernization of the locate services and excavation industries. They laid out 6 points here, and it's regarding the dedicated locator model, further clarify and provide assurances around cost recovery and liabilities that extend beyond Ontario One Call enforcement of the new administrative monetary penalty system. Continue working with the business community to raise awareness of recent regulatory changes and explore other tools to help the industry address late locates. They go on to talk about adaptive and innovative technology and how that can further expedite infrastructure projects. Work with Ontario One Call and industry stakeholders to incentivize and invest in workforce development strategies that attract and retain skilled locators throughout Ontario. We've been hearing that for a long time. I was at committee for broadband years ago, and that was a big part. We talked about dedicated locators. We talked about locators on staff and how to recruit, retain them. Work with industry stakeholders to identify and close gaps in the quality and accuracy of infrastructure location data. So all of those are are quick points that they have raised with long conversations, right? And the folks who work in this field who can provide that kind of expertise. And that's from Rocco Rossi, President and CEO. That was a letter that he had drafted. A few different letters, actually, but I won't read both of them. They do talk about phase 1 of the ministry's proposal and phase 2. And they do say that while we support the ministry's phase 1 proposal, we continue to recommend the project classification approach outlined in the Ontario Energy Association proposal submitted June 30th as part of an earlier consultation. And it looks to me where I see the emergency locate request, standard locate request, small project, large project, that folks have been thinking along the same lines for a while, the 4 different types of locates. Anyway. So, Speaker, everything you want to know about locates you can learn today here in this legislature, because it is an opportunity to talk about it. But I don't think that it is very contentious. I think that the history of the Ontario One Call agency, the priorities of it, the needs of the excavators and also of the infrastructure owners, that we are, I'll say, fine-tuning, and we are glad to be. We're glad to see the existence. We're glad to see, what's the word I want? We're glad to see that consultation has happened. Proof of consultation, that's new. Sometimes we hear rumors of consultation, but we don't know what was involved. So that's new. But, Speaker, I would like us to talk a bit about the title and delve into some other conversations. So the title of this bill is Building Infrastructure Safely Act, 2023. And I have an interesting article, and I was going to summarize it, but it's just so good. I'm going to read it. And it's called The Ford Government Forced to Fix Rushed Zoning Order That Put Tower on Flight Path. And this is from earlier this month in a global article. And the reason I'm going to share it is while we're talking about building infrastructure safely, we have to talk about following process, not skipping steps. Certainly not rushing a process that needs thoughtful consideration, that needs professional input, that needs, like people who are actually planners to be involved, whether it's environmental assessments that we can't sidestep. Ministerial zoning orders have been given out like candy in this province recently, and really, for the folks at home, an MZO or ministerial zoning order is like a fast pass. And sometimes they've been requested by municipalities, and sometimes they haven't, and sometimes they've been very contentious and people are really unhappy about them, and others are happy, and that sometimes the people who are happy are the developers who are going to make bajillions of dollars, and the people who are unhappy are the people who have to live with these decisions. So, talking about building infrastructure safely, totally fair game. So the article is about a rushed process without factoring in safety. And this is, quote, the Ford government was forced to scale back a minister's zoning order after the developer was given permission to build a skyscraper right in the middle of the flight path of Pearson International Airport. Sources told Global News after a rushed process. Months after it was issued, the zoning order was quietly amended when airport officials told the government it couldn't allow a 50-story tower to be built on a flight path utilized by hundreds of aircraft. The gaffe is likely to draw more scrutiny to the province's use of minister zoning orders, or MZOs, a controversial tool that allows the province to overrule and replace planning decisions made by local councils. So just to recap, a minister's zoning order gave permission to a developer to build a 50-story building in the middle of a flight path, which I'm willing to bet could have been prevented. Okay, going on. It says a rushed process. Quote, in May, the province surprised bureaucrats and local politicians at Mississauga City Hall when it issued 2 zoning orders to skip local planning rules on several buildings in the city. The announcement blindsided local officials who were not expecting the MZOs. Between two orders, the government doubled the size of a waterfront development to 16,000 units and allowed towers along Hurontario Street. The significant changes were announced late on a Friday night by provincial officials who pushed out the announcement just ahead of the weekend. Local sources in Mississauga told Global News the move was a surprise and bureaucrats found out about the planning changes at the same time as everyone else when the press release landed.
Oh, surprise.
Not the plane, but the press release. Okay, it wasn't just local officials, however, who were scrambling. Continuing, sources with knowledge of the provincial process told Global News the request for one building included in the zoning order, a 50-story tower, came from the developer and was turned around by the government in less than 2 weeks. The order to allow the building near Toronto Pearson Airport came through the Premier's office and was given to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, sources said. Speaker, I will continue. Airport forced to take the province aside. Quote, after the zoning order was announced, the city staff left scrambling to put the planning direction into action. Officials at Toronto Pearson Airport were forced to intervene. Staff at the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, the group in charge of Pearson, contacted the province to explain the building was in an area used as an emergency flight path and that its height could impact their operations, sources told Global News. The province was effectively told they had allowed a developer to build a skyscraper in the middle of a flight path relied upon by the country's busiest airport. So a spokesperson for the government confirmed, quote, in response to feedback from the Greater Toronto Airport Authority regarding its proximity to Pearson Airport, the former minister amended this MZO to remove the northern site located at 5645 Hurontario Street. End quote. Neither the GTAA nor Transport Canada, the federal body that regulates airports, would comment on the specifics. But it says that the airport authority said the GTAA continues to have conversations with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing related to municipal issues as well as zoning issues affecting the airport. In August, after being put right by the airport, the government quietly amended the MZO it had issued in May. The government did not explain its reasoning for the changes at the time, either publicly or to local officials. The updated zoning order removes any reference to the address beside the airport, effectively killing any chance of the developer fast-tracking their proposal. Speaker, I'm still reading from this article because why wouldn't I? Quote, as the Ford government struggles to move on and recover from the Greenbelt scandal, MZOs threaten to be the province's next headache. Since the scandal claimed 2 ministers and several staffers, the province has reversed its controversial decision to land swap out of the Greenbelt and another plan to force some cities to expand their boundaries. This was written a while ago. We've seen that reversed too. Okay, so as NDP leader has said, from the Greenbelt grab to forced urban boundary expansions to MZOs, Ford has a deeply troubling pattern of putting his friends ahead of everyone else, end quote. Speaker, that article, if folks are looking for that one, November 6th from Global News, Ford government forced to fix rush zoning order that put tower on flight path. That's what happens when you don't do your homework or your due diligence. And if you're not working with planning departments and you're not listening to the folks who know what on earth they're doing, then what? We're going to build a tower in front of a plane. So I'm making light of it only because it didn't happen. Crisis averted. But these things cannot be allowed to happen. And when they do, and when there are articles like this and examples like this that we can point to, it does call into question how on earth the government is building infrastructure safely. They can put that's what the Act is called. But actions speak louder than words. And we would really like to see them working with planning authorities, working with, like allowing environmental assessments and not sidestepping them or whatever, kind of shenanigans we can imagine. We don't want to see shenanigans. we want to see careful, thoughtful planning. Speaker, I would also love to know, while we're here debating building infrastructure safely, how is the government safely going to build an underwater parking garage? And I realize it's not quite underwater. If it were, it would be called a marina. But there are a lot of questions around that. And when, as the infrastructure critic, I have asked the Minister of Infrastructure for business cases. We've asked for details. The province has asked for details. We've been told a lot of things, including that the government wants to triple check everything before they make it public, but that was a long time ago. And if the government hasn't had time to triple check, this many months later after that statement, I don't think they're doing it. But we want to be reassured not only that the money is not going to be, flushed down the drain, but that things are done well. And I am curious, especially when, the mega garage. I'll read from this article from Spacing. This is John Lawrence, and this is October 17th. I won't get into the whole, all of the background, but the Ontario NDP had revealed an Infrastructure Ontario document that gave more evidence of that bid being suspicious, the bid for Therma. And I will tell you that it did appear to be, to have been a rigged process. And certainly the original call document made no mention, as it says here, made no mention of an underground parking garage, and that highly contentious add-on only surfaced in November a year ago. At the time, Ontario government officials told reporters and a Commons committee that many of the organizations bidding for Ontario Place asked for more parking. Well, that's fine. That wasn't in the original. That wasn't in the original call. So Therma is the only one who got it. But when we had received the information from the Freedom of Information request, there was a deck. And in it, the deck contains several renderings of multi-story above-ground parking garages to be situated on the former surface lot of Ontario Place. It makes no mention of transit whatsoever and acknowledges that, quote, all options are costly and require trade-offs. It further says, citing factors like the high water table and soil contamination, the consultants note that, quote, underground is the most expensive route and more so along the waterfront, although they also said that above-grade lots are generally not supported on the waterfront. Infrastructure Ontario redacted all reference to possible costs. But I do think that we realize it is more than just financial cost, right? If there's a cost to safety, then we have concerns. And because we don't have the accountability on this particular project or others, how on earth can we trust that when it is finished, that it will be safe? Because if we can't actually see the details, then it's, I guess, just a matter of just trust us. And I hate that. Okay. Yeah, that's more of the same. Lots of folks talking about Ontario Place out in the world, that's for sure. And also very interested in the Science Centre. And of course, we're debating Building Infrastructure Safely Act. And so I am glad to be able to revisit this article. Confusion reigns over Doug Ford's Science Centre plan that includes Conservation Authority lands. What it says here about the land where the Ontario Science Centre currently is, that will be demolished and replaced with something. Originally, the Premier had said with housing. But the Conservation Authority had written at the time and said, quote, nothing can be built on our land there, but it's not just because of the TRCA, it's also city and provincial policies, which is why we were confused when the province announced affordable housing on that land. Quote, it's within a ravine and considered hazardous lands because of the steep slopes and the West Don River floodplain. So I'm not sure how you would accomplish building in that area. quote, we and local community members are trying to get a better understanding of what the province's agenda is with that land. There have been announcements, but it's kind of unclear as to what the actual intention is. End quote. I guess Ford announced then, let's see, I think he's backed away from, here we go. He's backed away from the housing plan, maybe because it's in a hazardous ravine and isn't allowed. Ford changed course, quote, we're going to help you out with a new community center and we're going to help you with a new school because they're in desperate need of a school, I hear, end quote. So I think when the concern is raised that that area is not suitable for building, that there was an exception made for the science center. Moriyama said with investment it would last 250 years at least. Although the minister stood here the other day and told me that the building was 50 years old and we must acknowledge that 50 years is a long time for a building and likened it to a car and basically said it's time to move or tear it down or well, I'm paraphrasing, but you can watch the clip. But this building is longer or is older than 100 years. But when we're talking about a concrete building being 50 years old with a potential life of 250 years, and we're comparing the logic to, we've got a 95-year lease? 95-year lease for a, glass structure on the water? That sounds much safer than a 50-year-old concrete building.
I think it might be a 97-year lease.
Is it 97-year lease? I don't know. But anyway.
95? Just giving it away.
So I'm going to get back to the point of building infrastructure safely should not be around skipping steps or who sat with whom at the wedding. And Speaker, fun fact, I just had a wedding, which was lovely. Thank you very much. I appreciate the congratulations, but I'm setting it up, and you're. So I just got married, which is exciting news, and also exciting news. We gave out little wedding favors that were little maple syrup bottles. I didn't give out a single MZO. There is another way. But Speaker, but the point is, when we that was a good line. When we're talking about building this province, when we're talking about building the infrastructure, when we're talking about building the future, we want to be able to tell the future that we did it well, that we have the receipts, that we consulted, that we planned things properly, that we, factored in the future when it comes to, our carbon footprint, sustainability. All of these things should matter. But what we keep hearing is that things are hidden, right? Things aren't accountable, and that's a problem. And I want to talk about broadband because the government today has used this opportunity to talk about broadband, and I'm not unhappy about that. I would like to talk about broadband, but more than that, I would like to see broadband being built. And I don't know what it is specifically around this bill and the locates. I don't know which part of this bill is going to ensure that broadband infrastructure money gets spent. So the bill, I don't see how it's going to accelerate broadband expansion if the government is unwilling to spend its broadband budget. The FAO revealed that the Ford government cut the 2021-2022 rural broadband budget by $207 million, which is more than half, and had spent only 0.6% of its reduced budget. This continues a pattern of all talk and no action from the Ford government on rural broadband expansion, and the government spent only 1.37% of its $45.7 million broadband infrastructure budget in 2020 to 2021, and spent zero of it in its $31.8 million broadband budget in 2019-2020. So is all of that money that's been put aside for broadband, is that just waiting for locates? Like, is that what we're waiting for? Because if so, then I am going to wholeheartedly support this. Well, what's not to support in this particular bill? But how come we're still waiting for broadband? How come we're still waiting for broadband? Why won't you spend the money? And we'll work with you to find out if there's some, issue, some technical thing in the way. We'll support that. We want it. Everybody wants broadband. I don't see that as a partisan issue. Speaker, with the time that I have left, I want to continue talking about building infrastructure safely and the need to engage and employ and listen to qualified professional engineers. And I had the opportunity to meet with the professional engineers from the Government of Ontario, and their organization is, their union is PEGO, Professional Engineers Government of Ontario. And they represent all the professional engineers and Ontario land surveyors who work directly in the Ontario Public Service. So in the OPS, the engineers and the Ontario land surveyors. So they should be working in all of the relevant ministries. They are responsible for delivering some of the largest infrastructure projects in the province. They write standards, codes, and regulations. They approve major industrial projects and enforce and regulate environmental projects and operations. They do a lot of important stuff. They have eyes on the things that we don't get to see. This includes the provincial highway network, the Ontario Building Code, land surveying, food safety, workplace safety, safe drinking water, and clean air. These are professional engineers who do a lot of good work and heavy lifting in the province, in the OPS, for the Government of Ontario. And as they had shared, as Ontario grows, its infrastructure and public service needs are growing too. As Ontario builds, it needs safe and well-designed highways, clean water, and infrastructure that people can rely on. And PEGO members are an in-house, cost-effective resource, and they play a vital part in overseeing more than $100 billion in Ontario's critical infrastructure assets. Wow. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this not just because I appreciate engineers. I don't always like playing board games with them because they think inside out and backwards at the same time. But we need them. And because of chronic understaffing, under-resourcing, and uncompetitive compensation for in-house engineers, it's already hampering the ability of major projects. They're leaving. We can't hire qualified folks to do the work. It's my understanding, and someone can correct me, but I don't think that we have any professional engineers that work the Ministry of Energy, which is unexpected. But they work in different government ministries. And the government is rapidly losing its best engineering resources and being forced to rely on more and more expensive outside contractors and losing the valuable institutional experience of PEGO members. In-house engineers are also in the best position to do threat assessments and risk management under investment, and they will miss systemic risks. And they're in a good position because they've also signed their non-disclosures and all that stuff. Like they have to make decisions in the best interest of Ontarians and the government, right? I think both of those things. 30 years ago, their members conducted approximately 40% of the engineering work in Ontario, and about 60% of the work was done by the private sector. And now, if I'm reading their graph correctly, it looks like less than 5% as compared with almost 40% 30 years ago. And every dollar spent on in-house engineers, Ontario spends more than 10 on the private sector. So there's we need engineers in nooks and crannies to make sure that things are done well, and we're spending a lot of money to compensate private sector engineers, double the rate that in-house engineers are paid, and that charges the employer 200 to 300% more for the same work. I'm going somewhere with this, and it's local. And actually, I'm really glad that the minister is here because he and I share a big priority, and that is to get the GO train to Bowmanville. So I'm raising this issue, hoping to have my concerns. I'm hoping to put my mind at ease, to have the government put my mind at ease. I know that the minister and I both have very full inboxes that Mr. Mr. James McEwen has been writing to us for years, and Mr. McEwen is a retired civil engineer. And he has been sharing with us his concerns about the proposed line and where it crosses the 401, and as he has put, quote, knowing of how restricted the topography is in West Oshawa, please explain to me how Metrolinx Stantec plan to build the new railway link between the Oshawa station and south abutment of the bridge over Highway 401 to a grade of 1 to 2%, while utilizing a horizontal curve in compliance with national railway standards. A passenger train cannot make a sharp 90-degree turn as suggested in your documents. And please do not hide behind the design-build process, because as the proponent and in accordance with the Ontario EA Act, Metrolinx has a duty to prove engineering feasibility with your recommended solutions. And he goes on and he says stuff, frankly, Speaker, I don't super understand. But when I read words like a diesel locomotive cannot descend a 4% grade and make a sharp 90-degree turn into the existing Oshawa station, I think, gee, I hope someone can put his mind at ease, and mine, and all of the people of Oshawa. Yeah. He goes on to say a number of things, and he says, to be clear, this submission does not represent engineering recommendations, but rather it is information for better minds to consider. But as he says, one of the basic rules of civil engineering is to never design a sharp, tight, horizontal alignment at the base of a steep railway grade, as is currently implied with option 2 in West Oshawa, Ontario. In my opinion, the option 2 alignment is flawed, as it was based upon economics and not safety. Public safety is my primary concern with the Metrolinx proposal in West Oshawa. Speaker, I am putting this on the record because I would like to be reassured that I don't have to put it on the record. Because by the time we're in this point in the project, we're getting a train, and we're really excited. And we've been debating how the region is going to be able to build stations. I have thoughts on that, but I'm glad that we're going to be able to build stations. But I'm putting this on the record because not only is it that gentleman who is saying, please, please put my mind at rest. Please show me the feasibility stuff. Please show me the math. Show me the engineering. But you know what? When I talked to Metrolinx and I raised this, I said, I'm getting a lot of emails and I feel nervous about them because they keep coming. So could someone please answer him? Could someone please prove that this project is safe? And they sort of, they didn't get a real answer except we consult with engineers. But they don't have any engineers on staff. Metrolinx does not have a single engineer on staff. Wow. True thing. I mean, they have a bajillion VPs. I think there's a real number. It's like 29 or something like that. But they don't have a single engineer. But they reassured me that they consult with engineers. But then when you talk to the professional engineering firms who say, the government doesn't call us for stuff anymore. When we make submissions, it kind of goes into a black hole, and then they go ahead anyway. And when the engineering firms are saying, why aren't we getting calls on projects? And when it's the engineering firms and their association who basically will say, Metrolinx is one of the worst ones to have to deal with in terms of transparency, in terms of access, all of that, then I get a little twitchy. And when I have this individual, Hadi Faisal, who is in year 1 of civil engineering at the University of Waterloo, wrote a massive cited paper, Bowmanville GO Train Extension, amended final report, and this individual says, this is about our bridge. In 2021, when the plant was set to reopen, Metrolinx decided to build their own bridge for GO trains east of Oshawa GO Station instead of going back to the original plan. This new alignment has an extremely tight curve east of the existing Oshawa GO Station, which could result in slower trains, less service capable of running on the infrastructure, tricky geometry for diesel GO trains to traverse, and could raise safety concerns due to the steep grade and its tight turning radius. Note that we are not professional engineers, and these are assumptions we are making. But he says, Hadi says, in June 2023, Metrolinx held a public consultation which contained their planned infrastructure for the Bowmanville extension. When one of More Transit Southern Ontario MTSO volunteers and other members of the public asked Metrolinx about the maximum train frequency the proposed infrastructure would be able to support, Metrolinx refused to give an answer. It is important to recognize that we are not professional engineers and we do not have access to official project information, so it is impossible for our calculations to be accurate, and we are estimating to the best of our abilities, which is why we urge Metrolinx to be more transparent and cooperative by sharing more project information and answering important questions, such as the maximum frequency the proposed infrastructure can support. Based on our analysis, the proposed infrastructure would only support 3 trains per hour in each direction, which is simply inadequate to support the over 100,000 people and jobs that are planned to be located within walking distance of the future GO stations. Speaker, I don't want to jeopardize this project, so could someone from Metrolinx please put in writing that all is well, all is safe, things will be fine, trains will stay on the tracks, and that indeed we do build infrastructure safely in Ontario. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Questions? The Minister for Public and Business Service Delivery.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Oshawa for her contribution to this debate, and I heard her use the word positive, wanting to be positive, because this bill is a positive move forward. And I also note that despite other aspects of her speech, that we can and should, for the purposes of these questions, now focus on Bill 153 and what it does, because it's one of 153 bills that have been presented to this House during the session that commenced in August of 2022. So on that note, and to be positive, and I think the member used the word balance as well, would she agree with this statement from Electra X? The government's balanced approach through this legislation will support the timely delivery of important construction projects, protect electricity customers from rate increases, and ensure the safety of workers and the public while protecting underground energy infrastructure. In light of that, does she agree with that positive comment and that that's a reason to support the bill?
Response?
Well, and I would hope it does all of those things, and you got the letter from the folks who interact with Ontario One Call and locates far more than I would. But I will say that anyone that we have talked to in the field is glad to have the government's ear when it comes to safety and the locates process, because as we all talk about in this room, we want timely infrastructure, we want predictable timelines, and so if this works towards it, that's great. Still, though, the question from the Northern members and others around when it's supposed to be 5 or 10 days and it's a month or month and a half, I don't know yet how we're going to address their concerns. So hopefully that is something we're all working towards. Thank you.
Questions? The member from London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Oshawa for her one-hour lead on Bill 153, Building Infrastructure Safely Act. In the last part of her debate, she emphasized the safety part, the safety issue. And one of the phrases she used, she said, this government just puts out bills sometimes and says, just trust us. So my question to the member is, this government's been making major changes to the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification Systems Act for probably the third time in less than 2 years. Bill 23, which is Build Homes More Faster, and Bill 93, getting the Ontario Connected Act, which is the broadband concern. Is this just another example of this government's failure to properly consult on those earlier changes? And what's your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Response?
Thank you. And you're right. We have seen other bills that focus on this particular piece of legislation that we're not before us, but the one that we are amending, right? And I think probably we will end up seeing more tweaks or more changes down the road, because when I spoke to the folks at Ontario One Call, they did explain that they are still kind of growing and figuring out some of that. So I really hope that any changes we see in future are based on their input, and certainly the excavator side, the infrastructure owners, because we absolutely have to clear any kind of backlogs or address any kind of challenges to efficient service delivery, and especially when it comes to construction, we want to make hay while the sun shines, and we want to be able to dig while the ground is not yet frozen, all of those things. So I think we're going to continue to see those changes, and I hope the government keeps listening.
Thank you. Questions? Questions? The member from Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank the member from Oshawa for her remarks. And actually, I always enjoy hearing the contributions of our professional engineers. Thank you for echoing their statements. And I know I come from municipal government previously and was actually involved with some of the underground locates on the good, bad, and ugly. I know about 44% of Ontario One Call's 847 members are municipalities, and that means a lot. A significant portion of the locate requests exist to ensure continued safety of our neighbourhoods. But I really see this as a way to avoid denying Ontarians improved services designed to help them. And so we're not looking to cut through this bill. We're looking to actually bolster the practice that's already standard across North America in terms of getting the dedicated locates and the fees. So I'd like to ask the member opposite whether she values constructing more homes to bring down the cost of housing.
Thank you. Response?
I would be very glad to see responsible construction move forward. And I think that if this is a piece of that has been in the way, then by all means, let's deal with that. I don't think for a second that this piece of legislation is what has been in the way of building broadband. I think there's maybe a bit of political will to spend the money, or there's something else that is holding it up. So I am absolutely supportive of construction moving forward. We have to be listening to those who do the work, but also those who are trying to do it responsibly. Work in partnership with the planning departments of municipalities so that we don't take one step forward and have to take 2 steps back and undo the harm. The member was here while I shared that fun story about the 50-story building built a flight path. And I say fun story because it wasn't built and no one died, right? But the fact that that could have been allowed to happen, let's do things responsibly. I am in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? The member from Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member from Oshawa, who always puts out a very thorough debate here in the legislature, and who I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to listen and learn from. She talked a lot about concerns with Metrolinx and the building and troubles that we see within our GO systems, our train systems, our LRT systems. We have definitely seen many issues with Metrolinx and building, whether it be in a timely manner, whether there be issues with the actual infrastructure once it's complete. And yet we have this bill in front of us, Building Infrastructure Safely Act, and I don't see anything in this act that would prohibit things from going wrong in that sense in the future. The CEO, Phil Verster, is making $1 million a year. Is this bill reflective of what we're actually seeing within the Metrolinx world?
Thank you. Response.
Yeah, anything I've heard about interacting with Metrolinx from the engineering firms, from the folks that are trying to get access to them and in a timely way, it's such a mess, guys. Like, I have stood in this House and I have asked you to justify extending Phil Verster's contract or why you don't fire him, and I would love to see any metric that he has met. And if you've got them, share them, because the way that it looks is that Metrolinx is on the wrong track, and when we've got people with engineering backgrounds, not practicing engineers, who are flagging an issue, and maybe that issue can be put to rest, then why can't we get that, right? So Metrolinx, I think, needs the government to put a pretty careful eye on them and how they are indeed conducting business, because it has to be transparently.
Response.
And for goodness sakes, could they hire an engineer? Please, could they hire an engineer? Thanks.
Quick question. The Minister for Public and Business Service Delivery.
But again, thank you, Speaker. But again, speaking of Bill 153, again, it's not a bill that does everything on every issue. It's designed for a specific focus. And is the member opposite pleased with Enbridge Gas's the endorsement of Enbridge Gas of this bill, as well as the Ontario Energy Association, because it does apply to both a small building project like a homeowner building a fence, as well as large infrastructure projects. It's about efficiency, it's about one call, it's about safety and moving forward. Doesn't the member opposite support that?
Thank you. Response?
Well, if Enbridge is supportive of this, that's good. I mean, all of the infrastructure owners have to live with this, but considering that they were the ones looking at recouping some cost, with a $200 fee, it'll be interesting to see how they find that money elsewhere. Like, it's my understanding that they're, tracking the costs and whatnot, and that may eventually be borne by the ratepayer, and that's a different conversation and not this bill. But I think if Ontario One Call and the government continues to work with the infrastructure owners as well as the excavators to make sure that things can move forward, that's good. But let's also bear in mind that the ratepayer ultimately doesn't need to carry the weight of these changes or any others.
Thank you.